So first is financing it. Second is the governing structures that are in place. Is the ecosystem in terms of governance actually in place for the Sabah state government to maximize any aspirations or initiatives that it would want to take? Like, ideas is one thing, implementation is another. And a huge wrench in these plans, I think, when it comes to big offshore projects that would multiply the economy and generate a lot of revenue, would still be the ongoing Territorial Sea Act, which does demarcate the jurisdiction of the continental shelf, most of it which lies with the federal government and is still a contentious issue for a lot of the Sabahan MA63 advocates or anyone trying to push for more Sabahan autonomy. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Kopitiam Council, the third for this week, which we also happen to be shooting at KL Podcast Studio. It's always nice for me to come down to KL and finally do an episode in person with Hafiz. Yep. We always make a joke about how I don't think a lot of people like to listen to us when we are filming in our bedroom and our kitchen. So it's always great and refreshing to do in this kind of format. Also, it gives us a bit more confidence, finally, talking in person. We have already talked about the US presidential election this week, and we moved to something a bit more global, which was BRICS, which concluded its summit recently in Kazan, Russia. So I think we developed this kind of tradition where we always go back to Sabah on the third episode of the week here. But why Sabah particularly? Sometimes I think that, what else is there to talk about Sabah? But there's always something interesting to talk about Sabah. And being Sabahan, we always like to express that over to you, the viewers and the audience. So this particular episode, we're going to focus on a initiative and a journey that the Sabah state government has been very excited to embark on, which is the adoption and empowerment of Sabah's blue economy. Now, blue economy, what does it mean? It's just the usage of economic resources that's anything associated with the sea. So blue obviously means water, the sea. So is tapping into the economic prospects of what is available for Sabah when it comes to the sea. So this comes in tandem with a recent event, which was the Sabah International Blue Economy Conference, SIBEC, that occurred in around a week ago at the time of this recording. Correct. Massive turnout at the Sabah International Convention Center. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim was there as well, along with a full entourage of officers and civil servants. So it was a huge affair. Sadly, I wasn't able to attend, but I can hear that nearly everyone on my social media is attending or at least talking about it to some extent. So, Hafiz, you obviously were here in KL. Were you looking at this from the outside, or were you also following it intently?
I was just looking at from the outside, maybe a few clips, whatnot, and I look at the websites of Sabah Blue Economy. And one of the under the menu, it says that there's 4 pillars in this, right? And one of them is oceans living economy, whatever. And then there's oil and gas, of course, as we familiar with Sabah. But as they are projected, top 2 that would contribute most to Sabah's economy. Secondly, number 2 is fishery, and number 1 tourism. Well, I'm going to start with a negative note here because you have a brand new framework that created maybe in the last 1 or 2 years, which is very new. And your economic policy that would generate more income for you is still the 2 main that you have already existing in Sabah. I mean, tourism is already undoubtedly number 1 contributor to Sabah's economy, and fishery is about the same. Why wouldn't we use this opportunity to diverse even more, moving away from fishery and tourism? I'm not saying that these are bad or particularly not good for Sabah. I mean, it's good there, but to use the analogy of putting all of your eggs in one basket is the very thing that Sabah's government doing. So why don't we venture and try to project other industries that would overtake these 2? not necessarily in the next 5 years, maybe projection of 10 years, that would be good. I know there's a new initiative where we want to harvest geothermal energy. I think that's brilliant. That's living in tropical countries. That would be one of the best way to harness energy on top of doing solar generation as well. But these are not put emphasis enough. Where like in Sarawak with Bakun Dam, where they very ambitious with their plan where they want to supply to Nusantara, they want to supply to Peninsula, they want to supply energy to also to Singapore. So why don't we have something similar and using, maybe this is just me spotting ideas, use BIM Niaga to actually just, hey, you are already having this network, why don't we explore something similar what Sarawak is doing? Maybe we want to supply something, some energy to in the Palawan area in the Philippines, or in the area of where Nunukan is, the borders with Indonesia. These are the things that, whoa, there's something new. Because doing something very new like this would open up to other things as well, especially infrastructure. Roads, or even just airplane flights, Adi, because as of today, there's no direct flight to most of big cities in Kalimantan, but we are just next door to each other. So that's mind-boggling that we still don't have this kind of a direct connectivity that being talked about. Anthony Locke maybe talked about this, I think, a year ago. It still not come to fruition. So I want to end this first negative comment that I have with Blue Economy with maybe the focus. I mean, it's not there. Yes, they want to try new things like the geothermal things or to be more efficient. But by projecting tourism and fishery still to be on top, it's just like, it's a old book, but new rep to it. Same all inside, maybe?
Yeah, I agree that when it comes to packaging it does sound like you're just repackaging what was already existent there. But I think, to be fair, I'm going to be fair here to the state government and
here we go.
Be a bit more devil's advocate here. When it comes to exploring all these ideas, I think there will be two main obstacles that the government would have to contend with. One is, let's say you want to, like you said, ocean thermal energy conversion, which was like you said, amazing. But when it comes to other things, I think maybe you were thinking like setting up windmills in the sea and out there, right? Because I thought that was a brilliant idea when I was flying over from the UK over to Europe. I saw a lot of these huge wind farms out in the sea over there, very great. Then I had to think about the first challenge is financing. The first to actually do these kinds of programs, doing anything offshore or out in the sea, right, or in the ocean, right, requires a tremendous amount of financial capital and financial investment from not just the private sectors, but from the government as well. The fact that the Prime Minister was there to show support, hopefully is a good indicator that if we embark on this blue economy journey, that he would divert more resources to Sabah to assist propping up the initiatives and blue economy initiatives that Sabah wants to do. So I think this is a playing safe kind of approach. But of course, it doesn't match the grandiosity of how big the CBEC conference was this year in comparison to last year. So maybe there's a mismatch of expectations and what is readily available to pursue. So first is financing it. Second is the governing structures that are in place. Is the ecosystem in terms of governance actually in place for the Sabah state government to maximize any aspirations or initiatives that it would want to take? Like, ideas is one thing, implementation is another. And a huge wrench in these plans, I think, when it comes to big offshore projects that would multiply the economy and generate a lot of revenue, would still be the ongoing Territorial Sea Act, which does demarcate the jurisdiction of the continental shelf, most of it which lies with the federal government and is still a contentious issue for a lot of the Sabahan MA63 advocates or anyone trying to push for more Sabahan autonomy. This kind of confuses the jurisdiction. How much control does Sabah state actually have over its continental shelf? to pursue these projects. A lot of the great projects that you want to take, that we seem to want to take, or even the resources that we want to tap into, are 3 miles offshore, which already falls under the jurisdiction of the federal government. So there's already that red tape there saying that, okay, Sabah can only do this with the consent and jurisdictional consent from the city government, from the federal government. And investors don't like that. I think investors would be very like, okay, there's too many bureaucracy involved here. We have to go through here to the state, and then we have to go to the federal, and then state and federal have to communicate with each other. It's very confusing for any potential investor to, and this is like I said, this already exacerbates the funding issue from the beginning. So unless Sabah can find a way to get more jurisdictional autonomy over the area of which it wants to generate revenue from when it comes to the blue economy, it would require inroads in different kinds of aspects as well, from funding to technology to governance structures as well. So it can maximize that blue economy aspirations. Of course, we can still say that this is a very preliminary, very early phase of the blue economy, where the ideas are being thrown around, where the realistic goals are being set. But it needs to look, like I said, you have to solve these structural issues, but also have in mind, like you said, like I would agree with you on this, it's a grander vision here, a long-term plan, which Sarawak has been very good inculcating. It takes on the smaller things that it can take within its controls and then implement a grander design over time. But it's consistent with that. The consistency is that how can we get more revenue from the resources that we have? They take on a maximization strategy based on scarcity, because they know how much resources are scarce. I think they have a scarcity mindset. Sabah, we have more of an abundance mindset. And I've always kept saying this. Sarawak knows what it can do with little. It can maximize what little. Sabah, we tend to be wasteful with a lot.
Well, another thing that worries me, Eddie, on top of this so-called new framework, economic framework, is that we can learn from Indonesia, where they actually, to the extent that where they cancel any economic agreement with Tesla and Apple due to their disagreement on not doing more than just taking raw materials from Indonesia and then to process it somewhere else. Because this is a key of upstream and downstream issue, where Hajiji mentioned in the blue economy model, where they want to explore other minerals as well, not just oil, but copper and other minerals. That's important right now in creating semiconductor. All right, so that's a fact. The demand of copper is number one right now. But if we just mine and give it away for the foreign company to process somewhere else, job creations and high value chain economy will not take place in Sabah. So there's a much bigger loss to our country, where we have the raw material, it sits underneath of us, but most of it, the benefit, economic benefit of it, 80% of it will be benefiting maybe Chinese company or Korean company who will process this somewhere else, maybe in Peninsula or maybe back home in China. So that's what we should learn from Indonesia, where they don't want this to happen. You want our raw material, process it here. You want to set up a process plant or whatever, use our own local workers. So these are some sort of when we talk about trickle down economy, right? Like from upstream to downstream. This is what we're talking about. We want everyone, almost every layer of society, especially Sabah. My goodness, so many brain drain. We're not talking about just Sabahans working in outside Malaysia, but moving to the capital of Kuala Lumpur to in search for better jobs. So if this can be used to solve that brain drain, I can think that we can have much better Sabah economy, not just GDP speaking, but in terms of how we can expand in so many ways: job creation, poverty improvement, and whatnot. So while we have certain big companies or GLC company like Petronas doing that in Sipitang, in Samur, we need more of that. We definitely need more of that. And this blue economy can provide that. Like I mentioned just now, the geothermal energy. That's fantastic idea. And the company is already all in. They want to do this. They done the feasible study and whatnot. Go ahead, green light. But it's not enough of it. And if they do this involving a lot of non-Sabahan workers, I think that would be a shame as well, because Sabahans will not reap the benefit from this. Yeah, maybe our energy would be more stabilized in the future with this generation of geothermal. But economically speaking, it would not trickle down to Sabahans but to other people. So that's my another worry of this so-called new economic framework. Another thing that I would like to say highlight is, well, not a negative thing, but it's a good thing that this provides something for us to track on. When there's a clear framework like this, then we know where the Sabah's economy is heading. And like we mentioned, investors don't like uncertainty. So with this, there's at least a certainty in terms of where is the direction and what kind of company that Sabah will attract in the future. So I think kudos to Sabah administration to actually put this on and launch this economy Sabah Blue Economy framework. And I would like to see more of not just the government side talking about this, but private sector as well, because that's the benchmark. Something policy like this is working. If this is just, one side government talking about it in week in, week out, this Hajiji, talking about this, that's nothing interesting. But when private company talking about it, I think that would be the better, for the betterment of Sabah.
Yeah, of course. And I think I have to just be a bit more realistic again here is the structures in place need to be there to ensure that the blue economy thrives here. Factories, okay, obviously. Factories is a hub, not just a place to process. Resources go into the factories, they have to be delivered from somewhere and then has to be delivered out, right? So it's a hub as well for all kinds of movements of goods and then the movements of people. So what do you need to facilitate that? Roads. Infrastructure, ports, all these infrastructure, basic infrastructure that's common sense to have needs to be set up first, in my opinion, because for some people it's a horse and the cart scenarios that the horse comes first, the cart comes first, right? For it to be able to move. It's the same as for here. Does the infrastructure come first, or the investment needs to come first as well? Do the investments expect to bring the infrastructure, or do we need the infrastructure first to attract the investment, right? I don't think there's a wrong approach to any of this. It's just how we move from, the target that we are having. And I think that is the approach that the Sabah state government is going for, is that it's going to, in terms of infrastructure, hopefully is hoping that it can be given from the federal government, and then the private would be coming in as well to provide their own infrastructure as well. So the state government, I think, believes that the investment has to come in first before infrastructure here. And I cannot blame as well, because when it comes to available resources to set up infrastructure, roads is very difficult to build. It takes a lot of money. And when it comes to Sabah, it's not simple as laying down roads here compared to in the peninsula, where it's a bit more flat. The terrain is more favorable for that. So it's these basic things needs to be resolved as a way to facilitate, in my opinion, all these big projects here. Because we have this assumption that we need to compete, let's say, on the level of industrialized economies, but we ourselves do not have the necessary criteria or can meet these particular conditions to industrialize. To industrialize, we need, firstly, skilled labor, infrastructure, and then the necessary people to actually maintain and monitor these kinds of industrialization practices. So if I had to put a timeline on maximizing this blue economy framework, or even any kind of economic empowerment projects or vision, it would definitely take about 15 to 20 years for it to finally materialize. Just because the government says now, right, doesn't mean next year we're going to see the benefit. It's going to be something only down the line, 15, 20 years. And I'm comparing this to Sarawak, because they've been pursuing these kinds of ideas for even 20 or 30 years. Bakun took several decades to finally materialize. Once it happened, then it passed by an entire generation, only for an entire new generation to finally experience the dividends for such investments. So Sabah. Sabahan leaders as well, and Sabahan administrators, Sabahan thinkers have to be ready to get ready for the long term. Western countries didn't industrialize overnight. The Industrial Revolution was about 50 to 100 years, so it took an entire century. So we should be a bit also lenient in this regard. We should be a bit fair. We cannot expect things to industrialize overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. Sabah's economic prospects can be maximized within within one election cycle.
Well, maybe there's better days for Sabah in the future, and especially in terms of Sabah Blue Economy. But also next time, maybe Sabah state government can do some visits to Selangor or Penang on how they attract more investors without actually putting their own money, or work on whatever infrastructures that they already have. So I think that's something Sabah's government can learn from Selangor, Johor, or Penang as well. Any last remark for this Sabah Blue Economy, Adi?
I think I'm waiting right now to see the results for the whole OTEC, Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion meeting that's happening. I think right now is the time it's recording, so that's very exciting. At least we can see that the government is taking these new ideas. There is adoption of new ideas, and adoption of new ideas is always great, refreshing to see that the government is actually being responding to newer challenges here. But it's just now the implementation and how committed and consistent it is to these ideas as well.
Yeah. So. Maybe we have a new source of energy. We can have more data center, whatnot, because data center doesn't need roads, doesn't need ports. It just have to be there, sucking up all this energy, immense energy that they require to run a data center. And maybe Sabah could be in the frontier for that. I don't know, could be. So that's a good hope for Sabah. What is your opinion on Sabah Blue Economy? Do you think it's a good framework, or do you think share some negative thoughts on that? Where shall we find a short format of Kopitiam Council?
Okay, so if you don't like to listen to us yapping for 20 to 30 minutes, you can also enjoy us on TikTok and Instagram, and even on our YouTube, where we put up shorts, just the main highlights from our talks here on in general every episode that we record. So that is something that you can look forward to if you like. Obviously, the algorithm likes it when we're being a bit more clickbaity, right? So
yes.
If you feel like the shorts is misleading, you can always watch the full context as well on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
Yes.
So, anything else?
Yeah. And if you have suggestions for topics or persons or guests that would you like us to invite over here, please let us know by commenting down below. And with that, for this episode, goodbye for now.